And as we return to paying attention, once again, here's your host, Tom Duggan.
That's what they tell me. You guys are supposed to clap when we come back from breaks. I don't know why I have to keep reminding people of that.
Let's do it.
All 5 of you. All right, very good, very good. Settle down. Welcome back to the Paying Attention podcast. Tom Duggan and Paul Morano, my co-host. We have a great guest today. And I think the reason why it's great is because he hasn't taken the job yet, so he can probably say stuff he's not going to be able to say once he takes it, once he's officially in there. Jeff Riley came on 5 years ago, 6 years ago. He was appointed when the Lawrence School Committee became so incompetent that they couldn't run their own schools anymore. Charlie Baker came on board and as the governor and said, we're going to appoint a receiver from the state to run the Lawrence schools. And what he did was he took away the power of the Lawrence School Committee to make any decisions at all. So even though we have a school committee in Lawrence, it is really more like an informational board. They don't take any votes, and if they do, it's not legally binding. They're not in charge of hiring and firing. They're not in charge of budgets. They can't approve spending. In fact, I've had school committee members call me and complain that they can't even get information. And that's because basically they're not the school committee anymore, right? I mean, why do they need to get information? They're an advisory board. Some stuff you should give them. Some stuff you probably shouldn't give them. When Jeff Riley came on board that first year, I was getting all kinds of phone calls from people who just hated you, just viscerally hated you. And the first one I got was, he's not even, in fact, I got an email yesterday, he's not even certified as a superintendent. So, and this came from a school board member, so I figured the school board member must know what she's talking about. And I didn't bother to do the research, like the Eagle Tribune never does. And I paid a very heavy price for it because I wrote this big story about Jeff and how he was a left-wing lunatic and he wasn't doing any of the stuff he's supposed to be doing. And on top of that, he's not even a superintendent. And I ran into him probably about 6 months later, and he said, not for anything, but I actually am certified. I don't know where you got that. And I said, why don't you pick up the phone like the minute that story hit, so that we could correct it for our readers. We want to make sure we have the right information. Whether I'm ripping you apart or not, I want to make sure that our information is right. And he said, well, I'm here to run education. I'm not here to be liked. I'm not here to correct every wrong news story. I'm an education guy. I'm not a public relations guy. And a light bulb went over my head, and I thought, I think I have this guy totally, totally wrong. Let's give him an opportunity. Let's give him a second chance to get in my good graces and convince me that I'm wrong. And so we sat down, we did a couple of interviews for the paper, and I looked up every single thing he told me. I dug into everything he told me, and everything he told me was right. So I want to start off with our interview today, Mr. Superintendent, former soon-to-be commissioner, apologizing to you because we had you wrong. And I don't mind saying that I know most people don't want to ever say when they're wrong, right? Because they think somehow it makes them a bad person. I don't mind admitting when I'm wrong. In fact, I like admitting when I'm wrong because we get the right information out to our viewers, out to our listeners, out to our readers. And as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is that my readers and my viewers have the correct information. So welcome to the show, and we apologize.
Wow, I'm shocked. Am I done? Can I go?
Yeah, it's not going to get any better.
It's only going to go downhill from here.
Downhill.
It was an interesting time, right, Tommy? When I came, I think I was appointed actually by Deval Patrick.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deval
Patrick.
Patrick.
Not Governor Baker, and given the authority of both the superintendent and the school committee. And that was a lot of authority. And I chose not to use all the authority I was given because I wanted to work with people. And
which turned out to be a mistake, right?
Well, I don't think so. I think
don't be modest.
No, we kept the school committee. The school committee was very functional for several years. We had some attendance issues and some other issues recently, but I think there's an opportunity, for them to right the ship in the future. We'll see. But at the end of the day, we did a lot of work with people. We hired a lot of people from Lawrence who came back, a lot of our college graduates to teach in the district, and that's why I think we got some results and some things done.
Now, your biggest conflict that I've seen since you were appointed to be the receiver for the city of Lawrence was the unions, right? Were the unions that were saying, hey, no, look, we need an extra $15 because you put an extra step in front of City Hall and we have to go to a meeting. Like everything that you did, they wanted more money for, they wanted more benefits for, and they were, in my opinion, sucking the money out of the Lawrence public schools where it should be going to the kids, and it was really just going to benefits and bennies for them, right?
So, I mean, I think we certainly had some clashes. They filed some unfair labor practice charges against me. We were able to eventually come to an agreement on a contract that I thought was reasonable. I'm not against unions at the end of the day, as long as it's about kids first and not adults first.
Right.
And that's kind of where I come down on that.
It doesn't seem to me that Frank McLaughlin cares about kids first.
I don't know. I think Frank has been fairly supportive of the district in the last few years.
Who are you?
He does.
Who are you? Who is this guy? We go to coffee, I get a totally different story.
That's not true.
No, I'm sorry.
Come on, behave.
I'm sorry. So, all right. So, Paul, do you have any questions for our superintendent?
What went wrong?
For me to come? For receivership to happen? Or
Yes.
I think, as Tommy said, there was a dysfunctional school committee. They tried to show me the tapes. I never watched them. I wasn't interested in the past. The graduation rate was at about 51%. Less than half the kids were graduating 4 years. The test scores were legitimately the lowest in Massachusetts. And so...
What do you attribute that to? I mean, I'm sure there's
now that you've been here for 6 years, you must have a good idea.
There's 100 reasons, but if you were to just take one or two, what might they be?
I think there was a failure of leadership. And if you look and see what I did when I first came, I took 6 months to kind of assess the situation. A lot of people wanted me to fire everybody and turn it into charter schools. But I actually saw there was a lot of good people in the teaching ranks. And so, I mean, we looked at the bottom 10% of teachers that weren't really doing well by kids, and we had to make some tough choices. But we kept 90% of the teachers. I did replace 50% of the principals. I felt like there was a real leadership vacuum there, who weren't very welcoming to our kids, who kind of were just doing business as usual and weren't having kids at the center of what we were trying to get done. And I think it was that failure of leadership. Obviously, there had been issues with the previous superintendent and the school committee that was adding to the dysfunction, but there was a lot of talent inside Lawrence. And if you look at what's gone on with the progress, a lot of it's been made by having Lawrence people come back in and support their school system, particularly young Latinos who have graduated from college and come back to be teachers.
Right. I've always said that Lawrence is designed to fail and will always fail until Latinos, second, third generation Latinos who grew up in Lawrence, went off and got a job somewhere else, moved to Boston, New York, California, come back to Lawrence and start investing in Lawrence. When that happens, Lawrence has a chance to succeed. And you're saying that your tenure as superintendent, you've seen that actually happening in the school system.
Absolutely. You've seen great young people come back to their community and support the schools, and I attribute a lot of the gains to that. Yeah. And that, I mean, like with any place, right? If people can come back and be part of the fabric of the community, particularly professional people who want to come back and work on behalf of all the kids, that's the recipe for improvement.
Now, you're going to be the Commissioner of Education for Massachusetts. I got some stuff for you.
I'm sure you do.
My biggest problem, and I mentioned it at last week's show, I don't know if you saw it, my biggest problem with education in America is that we are teaching politics in the classroom, and we're not teaching history. We are not teaching English. We are not teaching math, not adequately. And teachers are hired to teach subjects. They're not hired to teach anti-bullying campaigns, global warming, gay marriage, acceptance, feeling good about yourself, self-esteem classes. That's not why we have public education. That's what it's become. And if you're going to be the Commissioner of Education, what I'm going to be looking at from you, and again, I'm only one guy, right? But what I'm going to be looking at from you is to get rid of all this politics in the classroom. Look, when they can graduate, when 90% of the kids graduating from a public school can read, write, and speak English, can balance a checkbook, can get a job, can get into a 4-year college, and then you want to talk about global warming, that's a discussion we can have if you want to teach global warming in the schools. But until then, can we get the basics right first and get rid of all this politics? Because I see public education schools as really propaganda training grounds for little Eichmanns who are going to come out and they're going to be social justice warriors and Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff. If they want to learn that at home, if they want to learn that in their neighborhood, if they want to learn that in their church or in their social groups, fine. But in the public schools, we should be teaching them the basics, and we should be doing that right before we do any other stuff. What do you think about all that?
So I think, look, I mean, Massachusetts is number one in the country in outcomes, except with poor kids, city kids, kids of color, and that has not really been addressed. And so I think we really need to start fixing that problem first to make sure that all of our kids in Massachusetts are getting a good education. The politics you talk about, by the way, I would argue on both sides, are just kind of a function of what's happening in the country right now. And I think that needs to be out of the classroom. And I think we need to focus on the basics, reading, writing, math, history. I think we're going to have a history adoption, and there's going to be a test on that. And we can talk about testing at some point. But at the end of the day, you want your child, I have 2 kids in the Boston Public Schools, to have a quality education, one, and then to be critical thinkers, right? To look and see, why is this person saying that, and is that true? And who's got another opposite perspective, and is that true? And then try to figure out for yourself, right? So sometimes what we're seeing in education is people trying to proselytize kids on either side. Right. And I'm against that.
Let's be fair, though. There's not a whole lot of Republicans in the public education system saying that Trump is a great guy in the classroom. But I walk through the Lawrence Public Schools and the North Andover and Methuen Public Schools, and all I hear when I walk by every classroom is that Donald Trump's a racist. So I don't see it on the – I know we try to equate it so that it's okay to say that the liberals are doing bad things, so we say, oh, it's both sides. But I don't see it happening on the other side at all. Even in conservative North Andover, I don't see it. I hear Trump's a racist, global warming, save the planet, gay marriage. I hear all that stuff. But I'm not hearing Trump's a great guy, global warming's a hoax. How about teach both? If you're going to have teachers say, some people say Donald Trump's a racist and here's why. Then give the list of, some people like Donald Trump and they say he's not a racist and here's why. Just give both sides.
I think teaching kids to think critically is the way to go. And my view is parochial because I focus on Lawrence.
Right.
But I do remember reading something about a town, I want to say it's in Ohio or Pennsylvania, where there's this real political issue happening in the schools where there's Trump families and and there's anti-Trump families and it's playing out in the school. And what I would argue is we need to kind of focus on the standards the kids need to learn, and then to teach them to think critically, to look at both sides of an issue and make their own judgment, because that's what we want from our kids at the end.
I'm sure Paul's got some great questions for you.
I don't know about that, but a couple of things came to mind as you two were talking. First, you mentioned that in Massachusetts the quality of education is tops, except for minority and poor communities, and I assume Lawrence is one of those. It seems to me like there is a cultural problem. I think you mentioned that there's a lot of talent there with teachers and so forth. How do you deal with the deeper problem that certain cultural standards do not value classroom education as much as other cultures might?
So I guess what I'd say to that is what my experience in education in various urban areas has shown that particularly for immigrant kids, they are the kids and the families that most value education. They are our hardest working kids. I go home sometimes and I wish my own 2 children, who frankly have become kind of ugly Americans and have had everything handed to them, had the work ethic and the dedication to their learning that some of my first generation kids in Lawrence do. So I'm not sure that's the issue. What I see is poverty has effects. We know that. We know that if you're a second language learner, or if you're even a poor kid, there's something called a word gap. Here, 30 million fewer words by the time they're like 2 or 3 years old than an affluent family does. And so you're already starting with an achievement gap in kindergarten, right? And so how do we control for that and try to fix that?
That's a great question. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, for me, what I've tried to believe is that it's the best thing that can fix achievement gaps is more time with good teachers, right? I was raised in a Marine Corps family. I will say, Tommy, that my father used to like to read your articles when you were claiming these things about me in my first few years being the
Did he like
uber
it?
liberal. He laughed, yes. He thought that was funny.
Excellent. As long as I can entertain, that's all I care about.
And so my dad, he was a Marine. He did, time in Vietnam, and he kind of raised us on this idea of a meritocracy. All kids, anybody can do anything if they work hard enough.
Right.
But that actually only works if all kids start in the same place. Right? So how do we make sure that all of our kids, whether they're African American, Latino, white, start in the same place in high school, and then let's have it.
Without interfering with parental authority, how do you do that?
Well, that's the question.
I think you're right. It's before kindergarten.
Right. I think it's about educating parents about the need to have kind of word and print-rich environments. You can't take over kids' lives. That's not.
Maybe public schools should have adult education to bring all parents up to par to become better parents.
Do we have money? Do we have money for that?
Wait a minute. It's bad enough they're indoctrinating the kids and turning the kids into little Eichmanns. You want them to turn the parents into little Eichmanns too?
Well, hopefully the parents are mature enough not to buy all of the stuff that they're being sold.
Wow. So one of the things we talked about last week, Jeff. I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner. What do I call you? Superintendent, commissioner?
Jeff is fine.
All right. One of the things we talked about last week was that most high schools don't have vocational training anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids, especially in poor communities, really need vocational. Now, I know we have vocational schools, but they're hard to get into, and they're hard to stay in once you get into them. I know I went to the Voc in Andover for my first 2 years. And it seems as though when I was in Lawrence High School, we had Mr. Hutton, we had wood shop, we had civics lessons where they taught us how to balance a checkbook, and they told us this is going to be your income for the year, and you got to pay your electric bill, you got to pay your light bill, you got to pay rent, and they taught us life skills. It doesn't seem like that's happening in public schools in Massachusetts anymore. You're going to be the commissioner. We're hoping to see a lot more of that.
I think you will. I think what you've seen in Lawrence in particular, all over in American high schools, kids are asking the same question. What does this have to do with the real world?
Right.
And
I asked that in trigonometry every single day. When am I ever going to need this?
And they're not necessarily wrong, right? So we have to get experiences and opportunities for our kids. In Lawrence High now, we have an early college program to get kids kind of inoculated into that process, because we've seen city kids wash out of college early sometimes, and to give them some support to have some success and have some early wins as they get into college for real. But then we have this kind of pathways program where we're trying to get internships for our kids to businesses in the community, so they can have these kind of real world experiences, some of which, by the way,
we'll take an intern.
Could be paid.
We'll take an intern at the Valley Pay. We'll take an intern here on the show too. We'll give you two. I'll take them.
Well, we appreciate that. So, I think you're going to see a lot more vocational programming. I have been very clear with people that I'm not setting an agenda as commissioner until I get there, until I have a chance to talk to everybody. But I've seen the value of vocational education, and I've also seen that it's become really difficult to get into a vocational school.
It is.
The standards to get in
Very
are
high.
much higher than, and there's kids that would have been great plumbers, electricians, carpenters who now can't get in. And so how do we figure that out? And I think there's two ways to do it. It's maybe expanding the footprint of the current vocational schools, but it's also bringing some of these pathways back to the traditional comprehensive high schools. And I think there is federal money to allow that to happen. It's something I'd like to see.
One of the things you guys do very well in Lawrence, and I got to see it for myself on multiple occasions, is you have an amazing junior ROTC program and an ROTC
Best
program.
in the state.
Is that true? It's the best in the state, or are you just being prideful?
Almost every year it's the best in the state.
I watch what those kids do. Some of them come to our bash. We have some kids from your junior ROTC come to our charity bash every year to do honor guard when we're honoring veterans. Amazing kids. They're the nicest kids. It's not what you would expect. You get these Lawrence High kids show up at a charity bash every year. They're in uniform. They're respectful. They come over and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Duggan, do you know what time we're going?" They're just polite, nice kids. And we're always talking about the bad in Lawrence. And I wish stuff like that could get talked. I try to, but I wish stuff like that would get talked about more by other members of the media. Because you guys have what's the colonel's name that runs the junior ROTC program? I met him at Lawrence High a couple months ago.
Sergeant Major. I'm blanking on his name now.
Sorry, I apologize. I didn't throw it at you.
He's not a colonel. Yeah.
No, well, I got Colonel Sam on my brain. That's why. You have any other questions, Paul? I got a couple here too. If you were done,
can I just go back to that for 1 second, Tommy, and say, when I first came, there's so much negativity about Lawrence. I've just seen a lot of great things. Our kids are amazing. We have great kids. Do we have some problems from time to time? Yes, we do. Just like every frankly, suburban or city does. And Lawrence was really being painted unfairly for a long time. And as you know, because you've personally dealt with them, you've personally given scholarships to them, we got a lot of great kids that are doing the right thing. And it's a really great school system. And there's a lot more to improve on. Nobody's saying that.
Talk about some of the good stuff. When you came, everything was a disaster. Talk about what has changed since you came on board. Are the test scores up, the dropout rates lower, teen pregnancy lower, MCAS scores higher? Like, what's higher, what's lower since you've come on board?
So the graduation rate's gone from, I think, 52 to 73%. The dropout rate's been cut in half. We're at historical highs on proficiency rate on MCAS. There's a new test this year, so that's all out the window. They're reshuffling the mark. But, we had substantial growth in math, English, and science. We got a lot more kids going to college. added back arts and enrichment. For
I
kids.
noticed that you guys have a lot more plays and a lot more artsy stuff, a lot more sports.
That's usually what gets cut
stuff.
when you have a
It's very. I cut my central office to be able to pay for a longer school day so that kids could have these arts and enrichment opportunities, sports. This is important to kids in life, right? I mean, maybe Tommy, you went to school for school. I went to school mostly for sports, and then I did well in school until I grew up and figured it out.
Right. I was a nerd, so I just went for the school.
Okay. Well,
I wasn't involved in any sports.
That's good.
I don't even know. Somebody was here last week, said something about a Gronk. I have no idea what that is, but everybody laughed when I said that, so I don't know.
He's a Patriots tight end.
Is he? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. I don't know. I literally know nothing about sports.
You're bringing back a very painful memory of last weekend.
Paul hates whenever I talk about Patriots.
And the other thing we did right at the beginning was we fixed the buildings. There were bathrooms without stall doors on them, with no toilet paper. There were broken windows with jarred glass that kids could cut themselves on. Stair threads were gone and on stairs so kids could fall down. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to fix those. We actually had to get a waiver from the state.
I was just going to say,
to use school department money to do it
Yeah.
because the city at the time had no money, right? And so, but we felt like it was so important that kids had a quality environment to go to, and that's, I think, what started the parents being on our side, right? They really started saying, like, we care about their kids and we want to have them have a great experience. They get to, play sports as early as 4th and 5th grade. I mean, it was kind of a combination of things, and it had very little to do with me. It's really the people inside the system that have made the changes.
None of that is true. It does have to do with Jeff Riley. It has to do with Jeff Riley's leadership. Under the previous superintendent or even the superintendent before that, none of that was going on. None of that advocacy was going on. And none of the shuffling around that you did was going on. I know you're a modest guy, so you want to give other people credit. I do that all the time, right? We do great stuff at the Valley Patriot. I give everybody else credit. But the bottom line is other people need to call it out for what it is. Jeff Riley came on board and he turned the school system around. Now, I'm not saying that it's a glaring success, right? Because it's still the Lawrence schools and they still have problems. But at least the Lawrence schools are in a much better position now to succeed and to build on those gains than they were when you came, at least from what I've seen. Would you agree with that at least?
We're at a much better place than we were, and we've got a long way to go. And I hope that,
Is Dan Rivera going to screw it up now that you're leaving?
I hope not. I think Dan is really about the kids in the city, so I hope that they're going to get it together and go to the next level.
But he sold out to the teachers. He sold out to Frank McLaughlin and the teachers union, the SEIU. So, I mean, we know where that ends up eventually.
Time will tell.
All right.
The good news,
he doesn't want to bite.
The good news is, in my position, I'll still have some
ability.
ability.
Thank you for bringing the beautiful ladies from the Lawrence schools, because every time I look out, I see them, and it's just like I could be here forever.
And Mr. Markins is not?
Yes, it's exactly right, yes. I'm hoping he'll date me later.
Okay.
All right. Paul, anything?
I don't know. Do kids still have recess?
We do have recess.
That's so
Absolutely.
important. To me, that was so important.
We actually have a school called Spark Academy, which intermingles academics with athletics.
Good.
So kids go for a period of math, and then they'll go for a period of gym, and then science and gym, based on this book out of Harvard University that says exercise is the miracle grow for the brain. And they've got all these studies that say the kids that exercise, it helps them learn better.
Right. Gym class is so important.
Yeah.
I hated gym. I actually literally never went to gym.
You know what I loved?
Anything physical.
Maybe you can comment on this. I used to love bombardment. Remember that?
Yeah,
Remember that
like
game?
Dodgeball kind of?
Yeah. You throw balls at people and you hope to hit them in the head. I was really good at it, but what's been going on?
That's kind of what the show is, right?
Right, pretty much, right?
What's been going on with parents and school systems keeping kids from being hurt? Is all of what you hear in the media true about that?
Tell me more. What are you hearing in the media?
Things like they're not allowing kids to play certain things, even tag because you might push somebody over.
Yeah, all the political correct bullshit.
All the political correct stuff.
I haven't seen a lot of that.
You haven't seen a lot of that. Okay.
There is, I will say this, obviously, a big issue around concussions, and particularly itself in football. And I think, I think we've had to be really careful with all of that. And what you've seen is a real drop in the numbers of kids playing football. Maybe not so much in the South, but definitely in the Northeast where parents are worried about it.
Yeah, football's a pretty big thing around here. We were talking last week about how the crime has gone down in Lawrence.
Yep.
And everybody's always befuddled when that happens, right? Because Lawrence's crime is usually statistically always very high. And so for the last 30 to 60 days, violent crime has gone down 40% in Lawrence.
Okay.
At least from the numbers that we looked at. And from driving around the city, I drive around every night and I chase police calls. One of the reasons I think for that, and I'm glad we've got you here to either confirm or deny this, is that I remember when my mom was the nurse at the Frost School, and she would tell me that come like December to the beginning of March, about a third of her kids would go back to the Dominican Republic. So you had fewer kids in the schools and fewer kids in the city. And I'm wondering if you still see that. Like, come like as soon as it starts getting cold, do you have that flight to the Dominican again, where you've got like a good quarter or a third of the kids that are just not there anymore, and then they come back when the weather gets nicer?
No, not at all. I think what we're seeing is we do see kids going back to the DR for a week or two and then coming right back to school. But at the same time, starting in January, we always, in the past 6 years, have seen a huge influx of new students, many from the DR, many coming from Central and South America, into our schools. So it's actually a time when we get more kids.
So you're saying more kids are coming in, more people are coming in.
When I came, Tommy, we had 12,300 kids, and now we're at like 14,100.
Wow. And how are you accommodating all those kids? I mean, Lawrence does not have a lot of room.
It's a real problem. We're running out of space. The city, as you probably know, sold off a lot of those buildings 10 or 15 years ago because they said, oh, the numbers are going to keep going down. But that hasn't happened. Right. So we've had to rent.
Bad planning once again on the city.
So we've had to rent space at St. Mary's or in the Mills, and that's not a great solution. What we have been doing in the last couple of years is getting back in the MSBA program, where the state will fund 80% of new buildings. We have some good new buildings that are in good shape. We have some buildings that are 1895 that need to be replaced.
Right.
And so when we replace those, we're trying to build bigger buildings. If it's a 500 student building, maybe we need an 800 student building to make sure that we have the space to deal with this increased enrollment.
Talk to me about the Oliver School. I keep hearing that they're going to tear down the Oliver School. They're looking to build a new school, that the properties that are surrounding the school are getting bought up by politically influential people because they're expecting some kind of a big thing to happen. And I haven't been able to drill down and find out, like, what exactly is all this going on?
So I don't know about the properties, except what I've heard in some press reports. What I do know is that is one of the buildings in the MSBA that's been given preliminary approval to get into the process. There are many stages along the way that you have to go through with the MSBA to get final approval. But the Oliver School will be, if we continue in this process without any issues, rebuilt and probably in a larger space, larger size.
Now, is the school system looking to take properties surrounding that property in order for like parking for a garage? So like the big controversy is you get a city councilor that was accused of owning a piece of property and buying a piece of property next to the Oliver School, knowing that you guys are going to want to take that for something and she was going to make a big profit. I don't know if that's true. I drilled down into that story. I researched that story. It looked very true at the very beginning, and then as we learned more later on, it all kind of got called into question. So I'm not sure.
I think it's too early in the process to know what the footprint of that school is going to be. If people were speculating or not, I don't know.
Okay.
I know nothing about that, but I'm sure it will come out if it was an issue.
Paul?
Well, I just think that the everybody goes to college mentality that has evolved over the past couple of decades is not necessarily good for many of our students today, and I'm glad to hear what you said about vocational training. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say something else about that too. I think we need to really increase our vocational opportunities. By the way, a kid coming out of a vocational school as a carpenter or a plumber, that's a great life,
Sure.
And you guys have called a plumber, you know how much that costs.
Absolutely.
So that's important. A lot of our kids go to the military. I think that's great. They're serving their country. That's wonderful. And the college thing, people in America, I think, are going to ask themselves, is this worth it at some point when you're paying $75,000 a year?
Right around the corner.
Right?
Yes.
And so in Massachusetts, one of the good things that's happened in Massachusetts is they have this thing called the Commonwealth Commitment, where you can go to community college, which is much cheaper, for 2 years. And if you do well, with a 3.0 or better, you can transfer as a junior to the UMass system,
Nice.
cutting your tuition down substantially.
Sure.
And my sense is that college now is probably what high school was 20 years ago, when maybe you have to go if you're not doing some of these other vocational things.
That's what I said on my Facebook page the other day. Right. College is the new high school.
Right, but there's some truth to that. And so the question is, for families, how can we get them to make this affordable?
Right.
I think of my kids. My son's 15 today. My daughter's 12. Are we really going to pay $75,000 a year? By the time they get to college, it'll probably be $100,000 per year.
Astronomical.
And I don't think. I think it's a bubble that may burst in the next coming.
Yeah, you got kids graduating with a master's degree in gender studies, and the only job available for them is teaching gender studies. There's nothing out there for you. But if you know how to do plumbing, electrical, you know how to do carpentry, and by the way, the Latino culture, they're very attuned to that. They're very hands-on. It seems like all of my Latino friends, they're not carpenters, electricians, or plumbers, but they're over the office and they're hanging out and they're like, "Hey, I can fix that for you," and they do. Like they're very good at the vocational stuff.
Are you saying you don't spend lots of time studying gender?
No, I don't. I don't know.
Okay.
I study women maybe
Okay.
more than anything else, but I don't study gender.
I got you.
Oh, maybe time for me to go.
Time to go. Time for Jeff to go. So, Mr. Superintendent, give us some news. Give us something that we can break for people. You're going to be the Commissioner of Education. You must have given some thought about maybe something you want to change, something you want to bring to the job when you finally step in at the end of the school year and become the Commissioner of the Massachusetts Board of Education. What is it that we can educate our viewers, our listeners, and our readers as far as like what they can expect from Jeff Riley and maybe some news, maybe something good?
So, as I said earlier, I'm going to take the first 6 months to really talk to everybody and try to figure out what is next for Massachusetts.
This is where he doesn't answer the question.
No, but I'm going to have an answer for you too.
All right.
With that said, one theme you may see from me is a return to focus on what quality teaching looks like. The dirtiest secret in American education today is that all teachers are the same. They're not. The variation in teacher quality in America is like this. Mm-hmm. And you guys know that because you went to high school, right? You probably had a couple great teachers, you probably had some mediocre teachers, and you probably had a couple terrible teachers.
Yep.
And
happy to name them too.
No, we're not going to go there. And so what other countries do is they limit that variation, right? And they're able to kind of have a better grouping of teachers. And I think Massachusetts has a pretty good group of teachers overall. But if we can start getting back to focusing on classroom instruction and really supporting and celebrating our teachers, there's been a lot of talk of charter schools and systems and structures and way to fix things, and we've kind of lost the focus on the classroom. And what parents care about is who's in front of their kid every day and are they learning?
What is your assessment?
Teachers are our most important asset.
Yeah, I'm really anti-teacher, quite frankly.
Well, you can't be, Tommy.
I am.
They're in the trenches.
I am.
I
am. I'm sorry. I know everybody says to you how wonderful teachers are, but I walk through these schools, and all I hear is politics. All I hear is global warming. All I hear is Trump is a racist. All I hear is the politics. And then I look at the graduation rates, not just Lawrence. I look at them everywhere. You look at Lawrence, Springfield, Holyoke, Haverhill. It's abysmal, and they can always tout, well, we're 5% more than we were last year. But yeah, but last year sucked too. You went from 5% to 10% or 8% to 9%. I'm pretty anti-teacher, quite frankly.
Academia.
You can't be, Tommy.
To build on what he's saying, academia, for some reason, attracts those with a certain leftist ideology.
I did not know that. Okay.
You haven't recognized this yet.
Hang out with Paul. He'll tell you.
And this is true from elementary all the way through graduate school.
Okay.
It's the subtle stuff. I mean, I know Tom's saying all this obvious propaganda stuff, but it's the how they teach the normal stuff, but subtly with a certain ideology that I think is the dangerous problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, teachers need to stop teaching politics. They need to stop pushing their personal beliefs onto kids and just teach the subject. I mean, look, if you hate Trump, fine, hate Trump after school, but don't be saying Trump said all Mexicans are rapists. He never said that. I actually heard that in the classroom last week. One of your classrooms too. I didn't call you because it's not important. It wasn't important enough to bother you, but I hear it and I just my brain just goes insane because I think. These kids have a hard enough time getting through life as it is. They have a hard enough time getting through their education as it is, and to screw up their brains, to cloud their brains with all this political stuff, it doesn't help them get a job. It doesn't help them learn life skills.
And if you're a teacher and you're not on board with that train of ideology, you get ostracized and fired.
Yeah, right. No comment at all on that. We can talk about butt boxing. You want to go there?
No, I don't want to go there, Tommy. That's Mike wrong because I have no idea what that is, nor do I want to know. What I'd say is that there may be a small percentage of teachers that are trying to infuse their own political beliefs into the classrooms. That hasn't been my overall experience, and it's something that we don't necessarily want to see happen, right? We want kids to be critical thinkers. We want kids to actually learn the standards, right? And if all our kids learn the standards and are able to think critically about things, then they'll be fine.
I know you've got to go because your people are all packing up and they're getting ready to go. Is there anything you want to leave us with, anything that you can impart upon our viewers, our readers, our listeners because we're going to transcribe the interview. We'll put it in the next edition of the paper. We'll put it up online and stuff. Is there anything you want to impart? You're going to be leaving Lawrence after 6 years. You're going to be starting this brand new venture, which, by the way, I really congratulate you on. I actually talked to Charlie Baker a couple of times, ran into him, and the very first thing I said to him both times I ran into him was, you need to meet Jeff Riley, the Commissioner of Education. The guy really understands what's going on in inner schools. There must be something that you want to impart with us.
I think for me, there was a lot of unknowns coming up here, right? I mean, I think I was pretty comfortable in Boston. My kids go to school there. I had grown up professionally in the Boston public schools. And so I took a chance to come up, but it's been the best thing that I've ever been part of. It's a great community, and a lot of the negativity that people, particularly in the beginning, it was a pile on Lawrence. That hasn't been what I've seen, right? I mean, I've seen amazing families and kids, and my kids can do anything. And so they just, like the Irish and Italians 100 years ago, they just want their part of the American dream.
Right.
It's the same story, right? Big families, God-fearing, respectful of schools. They're just here to get their chance, and I think we owe it to our kids to make sure they get that chance.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the service that you gave to the kids in Lawrence. Thank you for sending us Arlen a couple of weeks ago. She talked about what the Lawrence Public Schools does for homeless kids. Yeah. I thought, even though that was like our lowest rated show, I actually thought that was the best show that we did, because we actually got a chance to educate people about what the people in the Lawrence Public Schools do. So thank you for that. Any parting words, Paul?
No, good luck.
Appreciate it.
And your new position.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, guys.
Thanks for bringing your friends, too. Appreciate that. That was awesome. Chris Markins, thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Maria, for everything you do, and for your friend. I'm sorry, I don't know her name. Maria Aladani, thank you so much. It's amazing. Back after this on Paying Attention.